What if a single mistake changed not just one life, but three? A quiet ride home, a child too silent, and a man who wasn't supposed to be part of her story, but stayed. Before we begin, if you believe in the power of healing second chances and the quiet strength of love, consider subscribing. We tell stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. Now take a breath and come with us. This is the ride that found her voice. Single dad took the wrong kid home from school. What her billionaire mom said left him speechless. The rain came down in uneven sheets, smearing the windshield as Ethan Cole squinted through the wipers. Rush hour in San Jose was a mess on any day, but when the skies opened like this, it felt biblical. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, glancing again at the glowing screen mounted beside him. Pickup, Maya H. Location, Meadow Ridge Elementary. Gate, seat time, 3:15 p.m. He pulled into the school's side loop just as the bell rang. Children with oversized backpacks and brightly colored umbrellas spilled into the chaos. Parents and guardians waved from car windows or ran to meet their kids, but Ethan stayed seated. This was the third pickup of the afternoon. He didn't know these kids. He just followed the app, verified the names, and got them home safe. A text pinged. On my way. Can't reach the mom directly. Please wait, WW, Maya, until she gets home. Kid ride dispatch. He sighed. A delay meant risking his next HVAC repair job, the one that might pay for Lila's new asthma inhaler. A figure in a red hoodie approached the car slowly. Small, slight, soaked jeans. She didn't speak. Her face was hidden under the hood, strands of wet brown hair clinging to her cheeks. Ethan rolled the window down. You Maya? She gave a small nod. Silent, eyes down. He unlocked the door, stepping out quickly to open it for her just as the wind howled and slammed it shut again. He caught it with his foot, shielding her with his jacket. Come on, hop in, he said gently. Warm inside. She obeyed. No resistance, no questions. Just climbed in and buckled herself without a word. Inside, the silence was startling. Ethan started driving, checking the app for the listed drop-off. Oak Ridge Apartments, 10 minutes away. Do you want some heat? He asked, adjusting the vents. Still nothing. Then he glanced at her more closely. There was something about the way she sat, stiff, unmoving, hands folded neatly in her lap like she was afraid to touch anything. The other kids he ferried talked, played games on their phones, asked if he had snacks. This one. She was a ghost in the back seat. At the red light, he tried again. Maya, that your name? This time, she looked up, just barely. Her eyes were wide and glassy like twin wells holding back something too deep to spill. She nodded, one word written silently with her body. When they reached the apartment complex, Ethan pulled up to the front entrance. No one was there. He double-checked the address on the app. Correct. Okay, kiddo, he said. Looks like your mom's running late. Let me just call dispatch. Another text came in. Guardian delayed. ETA 30 to 45 Mini. Stay with child or return to safe point. You are authorized for temp hold. It wasn't uncommon. App policy fully legal under their contract. If the child wasn't released to a listed guardian, the driver was allowed to return to their own home for a temporary supervised hold. Ethan hesitated. He looked back at the girl, Maya, still soaked, now shivering slightly. You okay if we wait at my place? Just until your mom gets here. No answer, just that quiet nod again. Back at his house, a small rented 2-bedroom tucked between a tire shop and a taco stand, Ethan guided Maya inside. He handed her a clean towel, offered her hot cocoa, but she didn't take off the hoodie. Didn't speak. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands still folded. Daddy, a voice called from the hallway. Lila, his 10-year-old daughter, poked her head out, her dark curls springing loose from a headband. Who's that? This is Maya, Ethan said. She's just waiting here a bit. Her ride's late. Lila walked closer, studying the girl. She talks. Ethan shrugged. Not much. Lila tilted her head, then, as if sensing something unspoken, simply sat beside Maya and pulled out a sketch pad. She began to draw slowly and without explanation. Within moments, Maya glanced sideways. Then something happened. Maya reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a small notepad. Torn pages. Bent cover. She wrote something carefully, then turned it to Lila. One word. Stay. Ethan stepped into the kitchen to make tea. He dialed the dispatcher again to check status. Still no word from Guardian, he asked. There was a pause. Actually, we just checked. Maya H. was picked up earlier today. What Ethan froze. She was signed out by her authorized guardian at 3:10. There's no current open ride request for a Maya H. at Meadow Ridge. He felt his stomach drop. Then who is this girl? Dispatch went silent. Then, do not release her. We're contacting school admin and local PD to cross-check records. You may have picked up the wrong child. Ethan hung up. His heart hammered. In the living room, the two girls now sat closer. Lila had given Maya a blanket. They were drawing together. Maya had added more words to her page, now simple ones. Quiet. Safe. Don't go. Ethan stepped in, kneeling beside them. Maya, he said gently, I think we might have made a mistake today. I'm trying to figure it out, okay? She looked at him. This time she held his gaze. Her eyes shimmered with something ancient and wounded. Then, barely more than a whisper, came the first sound he heard from her. Don't send me back. 3 words. 3 bullets through the chest. And Ethan knew with chilling clarity that this was more than a mix-up. This girl hadn't just gotten into the wrong car, she'd been looking for a way out. And maybe, just maybe, she had found it. Ethan stood in the doorway of the living room, his hand still clutching the phone knuckles white. His heart hadn't slowed since the dispatcher's words, You may have picked up the wrong child. Across the room, Maya was now curled on the couch beside Lila, the two girls quietly sketching with worn crayons and half-torn notebook paper. Lila had always been an old soul, gentle, intuitive, careful with fragile things. But Ethan had never seen her like this. Protective. Present. He took a deep breath, set his phone down, and walked into the room. Maya, he said, soft enough to sound like a question. She looked up, those wide, ancient eyes still fixed on him. I called the school. They're trying to figure things out. He crouched beside her. Do you know your last name? Maya hesitated, then reached for her notepad. She wrote carefully. Just Maya. Ethan's jaw tensed. That wasn't right. No last name. No way to trace her sweetheart. He tried again, choosing his words carefully. Can you tell me who you were supposed to go home with today? She shook her head slowly. Then, in deliberate motion, pointed to the words she'd written before. Quiet. Safe. Don't go. He sat back, the ache in his chest spreading. This wasn't just a child with communication issues. This was a child in flight, not from school, not from the rain, but from something deeper. Lila touched his arm. Dad, she whispered. Can she stay for dinner? He hesitated. Just until we hear from someone. Okay, it's complicated. Everything's complicated, Lila said with a shrug that made her seem older than 10. The kitchen smelled like grilled cheese and tomato soup, the kind Ethan could make even with his eyes half closed. As the three sat around the small wooden table, the kind bought second-hand full of dents and water rings, he couldn't help noticing how Maya held her spoon like it might shatter. Each bite was taken slowly, as if food was something to be earned. He kept the conversation light, asked about school weather, silly things. Maya didn't speak, but she listened. Her eyes flicked between Lila and Ethan, studying every word like it might vanish. Halfway through the meal, a chime rang. Ethan reached for his phone, expecting the school. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. This is Ethan Cole. The voice on the other end was female, clipped formal. Mr. Cole, this is Claire Halston. I believe you have my daughter. He froze. Claire Halston. He repeated more to buy time than from confusion. The name sounded vaguely familiar, something from the business section of the news. I was informed that your driver app accidentally picked up a child named Maya Halston this afternoon. She was supposed to be picked up by a family assistant, but there was an error. Ethan stood stepping away from the table. Yes, she's here. She's safe. I didn't know there was a mix-up until just now. She didn't. She doesn't say much. There was a pause on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. That's to be expected. Another beat. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Click. Ethan stared at the dead line for a moment before pocketing the phone and turning to the girls. Maya, he said gently, your mom's coming. Something shifted in her face. Not fear, not relief, just silence. A deeper silence than before. She went back to her drawing as if nothing had changed, but Ethan noticed her fingers, they were trembling. The rain had slowed by the time the black SUV pulled up outside Ethan's house. The headlights cut through the dark like twin spotlights illuminating the cracks in the driveway and the worn welcome mat by the door. He opened it before she could knock. Claire Halston was everything the media had portrayed her to be, poised, elegant, unsmiling. Her coat looked like it cost more than his car. Her shoes made no sound on the pavement. Her gaze was sharp and searching. I'm Ethan Cole, he said. Maya's inside. She brushed past him without another word. In the living room, Maya sat on the couch cradling the notepad in her lap. She looked up at Claire with a mixture of resignation and detachment. No joy, no spark. Just endurance. Maya Claire said, crouching down. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. There was a mix-up. Let's go home. Maya didn't move. Claire reached out a hand. Maya flinched. It happened in half a second, but it sliced through the air like a razor. Claire pulled back slowly, her composure wavering. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked at Ethan, bewildered, almost wounded. She hasn't flinched like that in weeks, she murmured. Not with me. Ethan hesitated, then gently said, She's been writing things, not speaking, but communicating. That's a start. Claire's voice was low-controlled. She hasn't said a word in 7 months. Lila appeared in the doorway holding Maya's drawing. It showed 3 figures, a small girl, a bigger girl with a puffer inhaler, and a tall man holding an umbrella. She drew, this Lila said. She called this safe. Claire stared at it. Something inside her cracked. I've spent 6 figures on therapy, she said half to herself. I've hired the best experts. And this... She looked at Ethan. Really looked at him. Who are you? Just a guy who drives kids home, he said quietly, and fixes HVAC units to pay bills. Claire exhaled, long and shaky. I don't know what to do anymore, she whispered. Ethan didn't offer advice. He simply stepped back, gave her space. Let the silence do what no words could. After a long moment, Claire knelt again. This time, she didn't reach out. She sat at eye-level, hands on her knees, and said nothing. Maya looked at her, then at Lila, then at Ethan. And for the second time that day, she spoke. One word. Stay. And in that moment, no one moved. Because somehow, even in that quiet little living room with rain still clinging to the windows and the smell of soup in the air, the world had shifted, and healing had begun. The next morning dawned gray and quiet, the kind of sky that couldn't decide whether to rain or clear. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his mug of coffee untouched, watching steam curl into the air like a thought he couldn't quite catch. Maya and Lila were still asleep in Lila's room, 2 small figures tangled in blankets, the pale morning light falling softly across their faces. Ethan had cracked the door just enough to check on them. What he saw made something tighten in his chest, Maya clinging to Lila's arm, her breath steady. Safe. At peace. He didn't know what Claire Halston would decide today, but he knew what his gut told him, and it hadn't steered him wrong when it came to kids, especially kids who were trying not to vanish. He was mid-sip when a knock came at the door. Not loud, not urgent, but deliberate. He opened it to find Claire standing there again, this time without the designer coat. She wore jeans and a navy blazer, hair tied back, makeup minimal. She looked less like a CEO and more like a mother who hadn't slept much. In her hand, a brown paper bag. "I brought breakfast," she said, holding it up awkwardly. "Croissants. From that bakery on Redwood. Someone once told me they make mornings less impossible." Ethan stepped aside to let her in wordlessly. The silence between them wasn't tense, but it wasn't easy either. It was the silence of two people standing at the edge of something unspoken. "I didn't expect to see you back," he admitted as he set the bag on the counter. Claire exhaled, almost smiling. "Neither did I." She looked around his kitchen, modest, worn, lived in. The peeling paint on the windowsill. The small calendar with Lila's medication schedule. A photo of a woman on the fridge, smiling, vibrant, holding a toddler version of Lila in her arms. "That your wife, Claire?" asked softly. Ethan nodded, his eyes flicking toward the photo. "Tanya. She passed 3 years ago. Stroke, completely out of nowhere." Claire's voice dropped. "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "Thanks. Grief's a messy thing. You learn to carry it differently, that's all." She studied him for a moment. "I didn't come back to talk about me, or even about Maya. I came back because last night, something happened in your house that hasn't happened in mine for months." Maya spoke. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She asked to stay. Ethan nodded, unsure what to say. Claire's voice turned quiet. "Do you know what it's like to feel like you're doing everything right? The best doctors, the best schools, the best food, the best security, and still realize your child doesn't trust you enough to speak?" He looked at her carefully. "I think it's not about trust. It's about fear, and whether a kid believes that fear is allowed in front of you." Claire's eyes shimmered. "You think she's afraid of me?" "I think," Ethan said gently, "she's afraid of breaking. And she doesn't know if you'll let her." Claire sat at the table. She wasn't like this before the incident. She was strong-willed, confident, too smart for her own good. And then, one night, everything cracked. A custody fight between me and my ex-husband's brother over some family trust fund, and Maya was caught in the middle. She was taken, for less than 24 hours. But when she came back, she never said another word. Her voice faltered. "She doesn't look at me the same." Ethan let the silence settle before speaking. "Kids aren't like pipes. You can't just fix the leak and expect everything to flow again. They remember, but sometimes what they need isn't repair. It's refuge." Claire stared at him as if she hadn't expected wisdom from someone who wore oil-stained boots and lived in a house with no dishwasher. Then she said something he didn't expect. "Would you let her come again? Just a few hours here and there. Maybe once a week. Somewhere she feels safe." Ethan blinked. "You want her to stay?" Claire nodded. "Not forever. Not without supervision. Just not as a patient. Not as a case file. As a child. A girl who draws and drinks cocoa and can breathe." It was the first time Ethan saw the woman behind the billionaire. A mother who had run out of strategies, finally surrendering to something gentler. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She can stay." That afternoon, Maya returned with Claire. She was still quiet, but there was less tension in her shoulders. Lila greeted her with a grin and a fistful of markers. They disappeared into the back room like they'd known each other forever. Claire stayed in the kitchen with Ethan. She didn't check her phone once. They talked about little things, about big things, about the kinds of pain that don't leave visible bruises. When she finally stood to leave, she paused at the doorway. "My therapist once told me Claire said that it takes a village to raise a child. I thought I could be the village. I thought I could be everything." "You thought being strong meant being alone," Ethan said. She smiled, rueful. "Exactly." And then she turned back. "You saved my life once. Years ago. During a medical equipment fire. I was pinned. You pulled me out before the ceiling collapsed." Ethan stared. "I didn't know that was you." I didn't know it was you either. Not until I saw the hospital tag on your fridge last night." Claire looked at him one last time. Maybe Maya isn't the only one who came back to the right place. Then she walked out, and Ethan stood in the doorway stunned. Somewhere in the house, the sound of children laughing drifted down the hall, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The next few days passed like a quiet breath held too long. Maya began visiting Ethan and Lila every other afternoon. At first, Claire stayed parked in the driveway, tapping nervously on her phone or pretending to review emails. But by the end of the week, she'd started coming in sitting at the edge of the living room, half invisible as if afraid her presence might undo whatever delicate magic held her daughter together in this strange little house. Ethan didn't press her. He'd learned long ago that some things couldn't be forced. Safety was one of them. So was trust. It was Thursday afternoon when Maya did something unexpected. She reached for Lila's sketchpad, flipped to a blank page, and began to draw. No timid pencil strokes this time, bold, deliberate lines. Her tiny fingers smudged charcoal across the paper, layering shadows with precision that startled even Lila. When she was done, she handed it to Ethan. It was a picture of a house. Not his house, but a house in flames. And in the corner, a girl, eyes closed, mouth open, arms over her ears. Ethan stared at it, his gut clenching. Claire, who had quietly stepped behind him, went pale. "She remembers," she whispered. Ethan looked at her. "Was there a fire?" Claire nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes." "During the custody dispute, my ex-brother-in-law broke into my guest house thinking Maya was there. He was drunk. The fire spread before anyone could stop it. Maya was sleeping in the main house, but she woke up to the alarms. Saw it from the window. She was 6. She never talked about it, Ethan asked. She didn't have to, Claire said. She stopped sleeping. Stopped speaking. Started drawing spirals and dark corners. Her therapist said she was retreating inward to protect herself. But She looked down. I thought if I just gave her structure, routines, predictability, that would be enough. But I was parenting her like a CEO, building a system, not building trust. There was silence. Then Ethan said, "Kids don't need systems. They need space to fall apart, and someone who won't flinch when they do." Claire's eyes glistened. "Do you have any idea how terrifying it is to not be enough for your own child?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Every day." She blinked. He continued, softer now. "I spent months trying to fix everything after Tanya died. Lila's asthma got worse from the stress. Her teachers told me she was withdrawing. So I read every book, joined every dad forum, got so good at managing that I forgot to just be present. One night Lila looked me in the eye and asked if it was okay for her to cry, because she hadn't seen me do it." Claire pressed a hand over her mouth. "I cried that night," Ethan said simply. Later that evening, after Maya had gone home and Lila was brushing her teeth, Ethan found himself in the garage, a small, cluttered space he hadn't touched in weeks. It still smelled faintly of motor oil and rust, the familiar sense of the life he'd half left behind. He dusted off an old wooden box, Tanya's. Inside were her sketches, designs for interactive learning toys she'd once dreamed of launching for kids with sensory sensitivities. She'd been brilliant, and kind, and always a little bit chaotic in the best way. Ethan traced one design with his finger, a spinning wheel made of old gears meant to teach kids cause and effect through touch. It was beautiful, mechanical but gentle, the kind of thing Maya might like. He set it aside, a new idea taking root. The next day, Ethan invited Claire to walk with him while the girls painted birdhouses in the backyard. She hesitated at first, but eventually followed, arms crossed against the breeze. "I saw your name on that patent sketch," she said as they passed the side gate. "You and your wife." Ethan nodded. It was her idea. I just built the prototypes. She wanted to create tools that let kids communicate through motion, rhythm, texture. Not everything starts with words. Claire looked thoughtful. "I invested in 3 startups trying to do the same thing. They never reached market." Because they didn't start at the kitchen table, Ethan said with a smile. She laughed a quiet, surprised sound. He hesitated. Claire, I don't want to cross a line, but have you ever sat on the floor with Maya and just let her lead? Claire looked away. I always thought that would make things worse, letting her spiral without guidance. Maybe she doesn't need guidance. Maybe she just needs a witness. They stopped walking. Claire said nothing for a while. Then softly, "You know what's strange? In every boardroom I've ever stepped into, I've known exactly who I was. I've commanded the space. But with Maya, I feel like a stranger standing outside her world hoping she'll open a window." Ethan looked at her, his voice low. "Maybe she's waiting to see if you'll sit down long enough for her to unlock the door." Claire's eyes met his. There was no romance in the air. Not yet. But something was shifting, a softness between two people learning how to hold pain without crushing it. That evening, Claire stayed for dinner. They sat at the same dented kitchen table, passing bowls of spaghetti and garlic bread, laughing at how much Parmesan Lila could pile onto a plate. Maya didn't speak, but at one point she slid a new drawing across the table. It was of a treehouse. 3 figures inside, 2 adults and 2 girls. Below it, in crooked letters, "Safe Place." Claire stared at it, her hand trembling slightly as she traced the lines. Ethan smiled gently. "She's starting to draw futures." Claire nodded, her voice thick. "I just hope I get to be in them." "You already are," he said. And for the first time, Claire Halston, CEO Strategist Powerhouse, allowed herself to cry. Not because she was weak, but because in this little house that smelled like garlic bread and second chances, she was finally allowed to feel everything, and be held by people who wouldn't flinch. The garage was humming again. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag, stepping back to admire the delicate frame of the kinetic sculpture he'd just rebuilt from old motor parts and toy gears. It spun, gently powered by a small hand crank, the motion smooth and oddly soothing. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it moved. And somehow that felt like enough. Inside the house, he could hear the girls laughing, a rare sound that had in recent days become beautifully frequent. Lila had convinced Maya to help build a feelings machine, an elaborate cardboard contraption involving emoji stickers, yarn pulleys, and glitter glue. Maya never used full sentences, but she had started whispering single words when she felt safe. Warm, scared, happy. Each word was a victory. Ethan leaned against the workbench, trying not to overthink the future. Claire had been dropping Maya off more often now, sometimes staying for an hour, sometimes for an afternoon. The woman who had once sat rigid on the edge of his couch now laughed softly at Lila's impressions, asked questions about his tool sets, and even helped wash dishes after dinner last week. There was no grand gesture, no romantic declaration, just presence. It was, in its own way, more intimate than anything he'd known in years. Still, he felt at the edge, the place where something tender might begin or break, and he wasn't sure he was ready. That night, Claire arrived with Maya earlier than usual. She stood in the entryway, holding something wrapped in cloth, long, narrow, and clearly old. "I brought something," she said, a little breathless. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" She gently unwrapped the bundle and revealed a long-forgotten prototype, one of Tanya's original mechanical designs, a sensory puzzle board crafted from wood and copper. Ethan blinked in surprise. "This was at Halston Labs?" he asked. Claire nodded. It was sitting in a storage unit. The team found it while cataloging unused prototypes. "I recognized the schematic from your garage." He touched it reverently. "Tanya never submitted that one. Said it was too raw, too personal." Claire's voice softened. "I'd like Maya to use it. If you're okay with it." He swallowed. "Yeah, she'd love it." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Claire added, "There's something else." Ethan looked up. "I got a call yesterday from the school board," she said. "They're opening a new pilot program for children with selective mutism and trauma-related challenges, and they asked if I'd be willing to help fund a community support model, something less clinical, more relational. He tilted his head. Sounds ambitious? She smiled faintly. I told them I knew someone who could build the prototype. He stared at her. Claire, I'm not asking for a partnership, she interrupted. Not yet. I'm asking if you'd be open to the idea that maybe the thing you walked away from isn't done with you. Her words landed heavier than she realized, because she didn't know the whole story, didn't know how Ethan had left the EMT field after failing to save a 6-year-old in the back of an ambulance. Didn't know how Tanya's death had come 2 months later, a different kind of emergency one he couldn't touch, couldn't fix. Back then, he decided he wasn't meant to save people. Now, here she was handing him blueprints to try again. Later that night, after Maya had fallen asleep, curled up in a blanket fort with Lila, Ethan stepped outside to find Claire leaning against the porch railing. The moon was out pale and imperfect. The light softened the worry lines at the corners of her eyes. He handed her a mug of tea and leaned beside her. She trusts you, Claire said, nodding toward the house. Maya, I don't know how you did it. I didn't do anything, Ethan said. I just didn't leave. Claire sipped her tea. That's not nothing. A long pause stretched between them. Then Ethan spoke carefully. I walked away from a lot, Claire. I left the EMT world because I couldn't carry one more loss. I left the garage for months after Tanya died. I almost left this town. But I stayed because of Lila. And now... He glanced through the window at the two girls curled like bookends in their blanket cocoon. Now, I'm realizing maybe I wasn't meant to save people. Maybe I was just meant to hold the space where they could heal themselves. Claire turned to him. You saved me, Ethan. He looked down. I didn't even recognize you that night in the hospital. I don't mean that night, she said. I mean this one. Their eyes met. No music swelled. No lips moved forward. But something shifted, a knowing, a weight released. Not romance. Not yet. But the beginning of something more honest. Just before leaving, Claire stepped into the living room and knelt beside Maya's blanket fort. She placed a small card inside a hand-drawn star and the words, You are safe. You are strong. You are never alone. Maya didn't open her eyes, but she whispered one word, Mom. Claire gasped, a sound like breath returning after too long underwater. She leaned down and kissed her daughter's head, then turned to Ethan, tears clinging to her lashes. I haven't heard her say that since the fire. Ethan nodded, his own throat tight. She remembered you, he said. She just needed time to feel you were still there. As Claire stepped into the night, Ethan stood quietly at the doorway, holding the moment with reverence. And though he had once walked away from the world tonight, it felt like the world had quietly walked back to him, not asking him to save it. Just to stay. It was Saturday morning when Claire showed up without Maya. Ethan had just finished fixing the loose cabinet door under the sink when he heard the knock, not the usual soft tap that Maya did, or the hesitant rhythm Claire used on work days. This one was firm, deliberate. He wiped his hands on his jeans and opened the door. Claire stood there alone. Her eyes shadowed, jaw tight. She didn't step inside. Maya had a panic episode last night, she said, voice low. She wouldn't let me touch her. Ethan's body tensed. She's okay now. She's with my housekeeper, safe. But she started crying and said something that I didn't know how to respond to. She paused, hands clenched. Then added, she said the fire wasn't an accident. Ethan stepped aside and gestured her in. In the kitchen, she sat at the small table, the one where Maya had first drawn the house in flames. It felt like the room was holding its breath. Claire stared at the steam rising from her tea, then whispered. She said he was looking for me, not her. Ethan didn't need to ask who he was. Claire had spoken briefly before about the custody battle with her ex-husband's brother, a man who'd contested Maya's trust for access to family shares. Ethan had thought it was just money, a bitter feud. But now it sounded darker. She told Lila that she saw him through the window, that he stood in the yard with a bottle and a lighter, and that he looked right at the main house before walking toward the guest house. Claire closed her eyes. I never told her that detail. I didn't even know she remembered it. Ethan's jaw tightened. Claire, was there an investigation? She nodded. It was ruled accidental. He died in the fire. They said it started near a faulty gas line that he must have tripped something drunk. I didn't push back. I was in shock. Maya was silent, and the only person who might have confirmed anything was gone. Now Ethan understood the weight in her shoulders, the flinch when Maya withdrew the perfectionism. Claire had been parenting from guilt and grief and fear that maybe, just maybe, she had missed something fatal. I don't know how to protect her, she whispered. I don't even know if I deserve to. Ethan leaned forward. You're here. You came. That counts for more than you think. Claire looked at him. Being present doesn't undo what she's lived through. No, he said softly, but showing her she's not alone while she lives through it now. That's everything. Later that day, Lila found Ethan in the garage staring at the half-built sensory wall, a modular board covered in texture sounds and small moving parts. He hadn't touched it since Tanya died. Lila was holding Maya's latest drawing. She drew me a circle today, Lila said. It had a crack in it. But then she drew little stitches over the crack. She held it up. Inside the circle were 3 stick figures, one with curly hair, one tall with messy lines around the hands like tools, and one with a crown on her head. Claire. The cracks had been stitched piece by piece. I think it means we're helping her put things back together, Lila said. Ethan swallowed hard. Then he walked to the workbench and picked up his drill. Let's finish this, he said. Let's build her something that doesn't break. The next morning, Claire and Maya returned. The little girl looked tired but less withdrawn. Her shoulders still curled inward, but her eyes found Lila's the moment she stepped through the door. Lila took her hand. Want to see something? She led her out to the garage where the wall now stood in full display rows of switches, spinning gears, cloth panels of different textures, and even a hidden compartment that rang a bell when opened. A handmade system of motion, touch, and sound. Maya stepped forward slowly. Her hand hovered over a small copper dial. Then she turned it. A tiny melody played soft, almost like a lullaby. Maya looked at Ethan. He smiled. That was your mom's idea years ago? Claire, standing in the doorway, blinked in surprise. You remember this? Ethan asked. She nodded, stepping closer. Tanya sketched it on a napkin once. Said if the world could sing, it would do it quietly through broken things. Maya reached out and turned the dial again. The melody played once more. Then she pressed her hand to the fabric panel. Her fingers traced the stitching, uneven but strong. She whispered, "Not broken." Everyone froze. Lila beamed. Claire pressed a trembling hand to her lips. Ethan stepped forward, kneeling beside Maya. "No," he said gently, "not broken." Maya turned to Claire and for the first time since the fire stepped into her mother's arms without hesitation. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. That night, after the dishes were done and Maya had fallen asleep in a sleeping bag beside Lila's bed, Claire lingered on the porch with Ethan. The air was still, warm, the stars unusually clear above the glow of the town. Claire looked out over the yard. She's coming back to me. Slowly. She never left, Ethan said. She just went quiet. And you waited. Claire turned to him. I wasn't always that patient. No one is, he said. But we try anyway. A pause. Then Claire added, when I heard Maya say, Mom, again. I remembered what that word felt like. It used to scare me. Now I wear it like armor. Ethan looked at her and something passed between them, deeper than attraction, steadier than affection. Something earned. She smiled, tired but real. You know, I used to think survival meant moving forward no matter what, but maybe it's also about looking back without turning to stone. Ethan nodded. Or letting someone else carry the weight with you for a while. Claire met his gaze. "Would you—" He didn't ask what she meant. He simply answered, "Yes." And under the watchful stars, they didn't kiss. They didn't need to. They just stood together finally in the same moment, no longer haunted by the fire, but warmed by the quiet, steady light that came after. It began with sidewalk chalk. One ordinary Monday afternoon, Maya stood on the concrete driveway gripping a piece of pale blue chalk in her small hand. Leela sat cross-legged beside her, adding purple petals to a growing garden of heart suns and lopsided stars. Claire watched from the porch, coffee cooling in her hand as Maya stepped back to look at her own drawing a house with wide windows, a crooked roof, and 3 stick figures in the front yard. One of them had curly hair, one held a wrench, and one had long legs and a triangle skirt with Mom written carefully beneath. Claire blinked. She hadn't expected to cry over a chalk figure. Ethan stepped out of the garage with a toolbox, caught sight of the artwork, and slowed. "She never draws houses with people inside," Claire whispered, still watching. "It's always just empty buildings, rooms with no doors, until now." Ethan said nothing, just stood beside her, quiet and present. A safe place. That afternoon, Claire stayed longer than usual. She helped Lila and Maya bake banana muffins in Ethan's tiny kitchen, or rather watched in amusement as Lila spilled sugar and Maya corrected her by scribbling too much on a notepad. For the first time, Claire didn't step back. She rolled up her sleeves and laughed when flour hit her blouse. They were in the middle of frosting the muffins, Maya hyper-focused tongue poking out the corner of her mouth, when Claire said casually, "I'm thinking about moving." Ethan looked up. Moving, not far, just closer. Somewhere that's not an hour away. Maya's therapist says proximity matters, and I've realized something: she's not healing in my house. Not yet. But when she's here, she breathes differently. He wiped frosting off his hand. "You think she needs this house?" Claire shook her head. "No, I think she needs this feeling. And I want to figure out how to give her that wherever we are." Ethan glanced toward Maya, who was now carefully placing a blueberry in the center of each muffin like it was a gemstone. "She doesn't need perfect," he said. "She just needs presence." Claire smiled. "I think you've said that before. It's worth repeating." A few days later, Claire invited Ethan and Lila to dinner at her house. It was the first time Ethan had set foot inside the Halston estate, a sprawling modern home perched on a quiet hill just outside the city. Every surface gleamed. Every corner was curated. But there were signs of change. Toys scattered in the living room. Maya's drawings taped unevenly along the hallway wall. Lila was instantly enchanted by the indoor koi pond. Maya showed her how to tap the glass so the fish would follow her finger. Claire, meanwhile, stood with Ethan in the kitchen, uncharacteristically nervous. "Cooking in this place feels like hosting a reality show," she muttered, eyeing the sleek stovetop. "I had to ask the housekeeper how to turn the oven on." Ethan grinned. "Let me guess, you usually just call for takeout." "Don't judge me." "I'm not judging, just impressed you even attempted it." She handed him a bowl of salad. "You're in charge of croutons. Don't let the fish judge you either." The evening unfolded with surprising ease. Over candlelight and mismatched stories, Claire's home lost its stiffness. It became warm, lived in, real. After dessert, Claire poured 2 glasses of wine and walked Ethan to the back deck. The girls stayed behind to build a tower of pillows in the living room. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said, looking out over the dark horizon, "about sitting on the floor. About being a witness, not a fixer." Ethan waited. "I want to try," she continued. "I want to be that for her. Not the version of me who shows up with solutions and a 5-year plan. Just the one who's still here when the tears come, even if I don't know what to say." He turned toward her. "You're already doing it, Claire." She looked at him, then eyes earnest. "It scares me. This not knowing. I've built my whole life on certainty. Then maybe this is the part where you get to build something real." She let out a soft laugh. "You're dangerous, you know. Saying things like that. Is that so?" "Yeah." makes a woman consider things like walking away from the boardroom. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Don't do that. Just make the boardroom come to you. Claire smiled, and for a moment they stood there shoulder to shoulder, the wind tugging gently at her hair. The next afternoon, Ethan found Maya in the garage, standing in front of the sensory wall he and Lila had built. She was pressing her hands against the soft panels, letting the gears turn beneath her palms. He didn't interrupt, just watched. Eventually, she turned to him and held out a page. On it was a simple sentence carefully written in crayon. "Can I stay more days?" Ethan knelt beside her, heart full. "You can stay as many days as you need." She nodded, then whispered, "Mom says maybe we make a new house." A new house? She pointed to the drawing from before the chalk one. That one. But real. Ethan smiled. Like a treehouse. She shook her head, then wrote, "A house that stays warm, even if it rains." And in that moment, Ethan understood. It wasn't about bricks or blueprints. It was about presence and permanence, and the kind of love that didn't leave when storms came. That night, when Claire came to pick Maya up, Ethan walked her to the car. Before she got in, she turned. She asked me if she could live in 2 places. She said, voice trembling. I told her yes. That healing doesn't have to come in just one shape. Ethan nodded. Claire hesitated, then leaned forward and kissed him soft, brief, no promises, just truth. "I don't know what this is yet," she whispered. "But I know it feels like the kind of house she'd want to draw." And with that, she left. And Ethan stood there, heart wide open, knowing that sometimes the safest place for a child was wherever 2 people had finally decided to stay. The auditorium buzzed with the low hum of parents gathering, folding chairs squeaking under shifting weight, whispers and coughs blending into the soundtrack of an ordinary school assembly. But for Ethan, the noise was secondary. His eyes were on Maya. She stood behind the curtain on the left side of the stage, dressed in a pale yellow dress that Claire had chosen with gentle precision. Her fingers clutched the edge of the velvet drape knuckles white. Her eyes weren't afraid, not exactly, just far away. Like a person standing on the edge of something they weren't sure would catch them if they jumped. Claire knelt beside her, tucking a wisp of hair behind her daughter's ear. "You don't have to do it, sweetie," she whispered. "Not for the teachers, not even for me. If it doesn't feel right, we'll walk right out together." Maya looked at her, then past her at Ethan standing just a few steps away. He gave a small, steady nod. "We're all here, and nothing changes if you say no." Maya's eyes flicked toward the stage again. The piano was already in place, the microphone set low. The program had her listed only as Maya H. No description, no pressure. Just a slot labeled Original Composition, Optional Vocal Accompaniment. She pulled out her notepad, the one she still carried in her small crossbody bag, and wrote, "What if I can't finish?" Claire exhaled, reading the page. "Then you stop, and we go home. Proud." Maya stared at the words a beat longer, then closed the notebook, and stepped onto the stage. Ethan forgot to breathe. From his seat in the 3rd row just beside Claire and Lila, he watched as Maya sat at the piano bench. Her back was straight. Her feet barely reached the pedals. For a moment, the room seemed to expand like time had made space for something sacred. Then her fingers began to move. The melody was quiet, measured. Notes that tiptoed across the keys like a memory trying to come back. Each chord seemed to hold its breath before moving to the next. It was a lullaby, but one laced with a kind of ache that didn't belong to a child her age. Claire covered her mouth. Lila reached for Ethan's hand. The auditorium stilled. Then Maya leaned toward the microphone and sang. The voice that came out was delicate, unsure, but it was there. Notes shaped into words. Words into meaning. It wasn't about pitch or volume. It was about courage. Vulnerability made audible. When the world got loud, I got small. Found a corner curled up tall. But there's a door with painted light, and I knock most every night." A hush fell over the room so complete Ethan could hear the soft whir of the HVAC vent above them. "You stayed when others stepped away. You listened when I had no say. Now I'm learning how to be not broken, just becoming me." Her fingers faltered for a half-second. A wrong note. A ripple of fear crossed her face, but then from the audience a small clear voice called out, "You got this, Maya Lila." Maya looked up, smiled, and finished. The applause began like thunder restrained. Parents, teachers, even a few students all clapping not just politely but with genuine awe. It wasn't just about the song, it was about what it cost to sing it. Maya stood, bowed quickly, and ran off stage. Claire was already moving heels forgotten, rushing down the side aisle. But it was Maya who reached her first, flying into her mother's arms with a kind of relief that made Claire crumble right there in the wings. Ethan arrived a second later, wrapping them both in his arms without hesitation. Maya whispered voice, still breathless, "I did it." Claire kissed her forehead. "You did, baby. You really did." And then Maya turned, looking up at Ethan. "It's safe now," she said. It took him a moment to realize she wasn't talking about the stage. She was talking about her voice. Afterward, the four of them returned to Ethan's house, partly because Maya asked for it, partly because it just felt right. Claire had stopped questioning the pull of that little house with its creaky floorboards and hand-built kitchen table. They ate grilled cheese and soup comfort food served like a victory meal and talked about everything and nothing at once. "You know," Claire said, laughing softly as Lila reenacted her dramatic gasp during the performance. "I've sat in 100 boardrooms where people fought for control. But tonight, I watched a little girl fight for something far more fragile. And win." Ethan smiled, refilling her tea. "And she didn't even need a PowerPoint." Claire leaned her chin into her hand. "I didn't know pride could feel like this. Not the kind that comes from ownership, but the kind that comes from letting go." He looked at her carefully. "You're doing it, you know. The hard part." She tilted her head. "Which part? Being a witness." Claire didn't reply immediately, then said quietly, "I was never taught how to stay. I was taught how to lead, how to fix. But this, staying beside someone while they tremble, that's new." "And beautiful," Ethan added. Claire met his gaze, and terrifying. He nodded. That too. That night, after Maya had fallen asleep on the couch with Lila beside her, Claire lingered in the doorway, coat draped over her arm. She looked exhausted. And alive. "I should go," she said. "You don't have to," Ethan replied. She looked at him. For a long moment, then whispered, "What happens next?" Ethan smiled, not with certainty but with something better. "Whatever she draws next." Claire reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. Together they stood in the quiet hum of the living room, two adults stitched together by something no contract or plan could hold. Not promises, but presence. Not perfection, but the kind of love that shows up and stays. The garage was no longer just a place for tools. What began as a cluttered space for broken parts had become something entirely different, a sanctuary stitched from wood motion and quiet resilience. The sensory wall Ethan and Leila built had grown, expanded, not just in size, but in meaning. Maya now called it the listening wall, and the name stuck. Every Sunday afternoon, a few neighborhood kids trickled in, some shy, some loud, some holding more inside than they could say. There was no formal invitation, just an open door. Ethan's gentle nod and the magnetic pull of a space where silence wasn't awkward but honored. Today, Maya was guiding a boy named Theo, a 7-year-old with a stutter and an aversion to eye contact through the wheel and lever system. She didn't speak, just smiled and pointed, showing him how the gears hummed when turned in a sequence. Theo smiled back. Claire sat nearby on a folding chair watching with a stillness that didn't come easy to her. Not long ago, she would have tried to structure the room, rearrange the tools, suggested a checklist. But now, she simply listened. Watched, trusted. "You ever think this would happen?" she asked Ethan quietly. He tightened a bolt on one of the new panels. "You mean turning a mechanic's garage into a therapy session?" She nodded. He smiled. Tanya used to say kids didn't need more adults talking at them. They needed spaces that talked with them, spaces that held them without requiring explanation. Claire looked at him. "You think this space holds you too?" Ethan paused, then met her gaze. "Every time I build something that helps a child stay, it feels like a part of me gets to come home too." She smiled softly. "Then, let's keep building." Later that week, word began to spread. A school counselor stopped by to observe. A local therapist offered to volunteer. Parents started calling Ethan's number, asking about the wall. Leila made a handmade sign, "Safe place. No shoes, no yelling. Big feelings welcome." Claire suggested they file a community permit to turn the garage into a registered support space. Ethan resisted, at first worried it would become too official, too clinical. But Claire gently offered a compromise. "We won't call it a program," she said. "We'll call it a pause. Just a place where people, kids, parents, even us can come and breathe before deciding what's next." Ethan considered that, then nodded. "A pause," he said. "I like that." That Saturday, Claire brought Maya back with something new in her hand, a small wooden box handcrafted and smooth. On the lid, Maya had painted a single word in imperfect block letters, "Feel." Inside were small wooden tokens, each engraved with a simple word, scared, brave, angry, tired, loved, lost, curious, safe. She showed Ethan how she used them with Lila. They'd each pick a token and place it on the sensory wall, letting the wall hold the feeling until they were ready to talk. Maya picked safe. Lila picked curious. Claire picked tired. Ethan paused, then chose one and handed it to Maya. She read it, hopeful. She beamed. It was the first time Ethan had truly seen her smile like that, not a flicker, but a sunrise. Full and certain. That evening, Claire stayed for dinner again. The house was full of quiet joy, not loud or showy, but the kind that lingered in corners and beneath words. After the girls went to bed, Claire helped Ethan wash dishes. She stood at the sink sleeves, rolled-up eyes, rimmed with fatigue, but bright with something else. Peace, maybe. "Do you ever worry this will disappear?" she asked. Ethan handed her a rinsed plate. "What do you mean, all of this? Her progress, this feeling, like we're all balanced on something too delicate to last." He leaned against the counter. "Every day." She looked at him. "But then I remember," he continued, "that it's not about guaranteeing permanence. It's about showing up, even if it's fragile. Especially then." Claire dried the plate. "You make it sound simple. It's not. But it's worth it." She was quiet for a long moment. Then said, almost to herself, "I've spent so much of my life trying to be bulletproof." Ethan gently took the towel from her hand. "Maybe it's time to be reachable instead." Claire stared at him, eyes brimming. "You make me feel like I'm allowed to get it wrong." "You are," he said. "We all are." Before she left, she stepped into Maya's room and kissed her good night. Then she turned to Ethan, hand on the doorknob. "I've been invited to speak at a national conference in D.C. next month," she said. "They want me to talk about rebuilding after crisis, about adaptive mental health support." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You gonna tell them about the garage?" Claire smiled. "I was thinking about telling them about you. About the man who taught me that healing doesn't require a doctorate, just an open door and a heart that doesn't flinch." Ethan looked away, embarrassed. "Make sure you spell my name right." She stepped closer. "Ethan." He looked up. "I don't know what happens after D.C. or next year. But I know I want Maya to keep choosing spaces like this. And I want to keep choosing us." His heart pounded, but he didn't reach for her. He just said, "Then let's build something we don't have to walk away from." She nodded and kissed him. Not out of urgency or because the moment demanded it, but because in that small lived-in kitchen with crumbs on the counter and hope between them there was no need to run anymore. only room to stay and grow together. The classroom smelled faintly of glue sticks and pencil shavings. A poster on the far wall read, "Your feelings matter here." Ethan sat in one of the two small plastic chairs, knees awkwardly bent, watching Maya from across the room. She was at the center of a semicircle with 6 other kids, each holding a small token from the field box she'd helped create. This wasn't the garage. This was the first trial session of the school district's pilot emotional processing group, a concept Claire had gently pitched built from what she'd seen grow in Ethan's garage. But today, it wasn't Claire leading the session. It was Maya, 8 years old, once silent, now gently helping others find the words she used to hide from. Each child took turns placing their token in the center of the circle. Maya didn't rush them. She nodded, waited, listened. When it was her turn, she reached into her small pouch and held up quiet. Then she smiled. "I'm still this," she said softly. "And that's okay." The other kids nodded. One boy, older, maybe 10, whispered, "Me too." Ethan blinked hard. It was working. Outside the classroom, Claire leaned against the hallway wall, watching through the glass. She wore no makeup, no blazer, just a soft sweater and jeans hair tucked into a loose braid. She looked more like a mom than a CEO, and that somehow made her even more radiant. She rewrote the outline, she said, as Ethan joined her. The therapist had a whole plan. Maya asked if she could do it her way instead. "Let me guess," Ethan said. "No pressure, no circle rules, just presence." Claire nodded. "She doesn't just need healing anymore. She's leading it." They walked slowly down the hallway past rows of student art and construction paper gratitude trees. "She's not afraid of silence anymore," Claire said. "Because silence used to mean danger," Ethan replied. "Now it means space." Claire stopped, turned to him. "You gave her that space, Ethan." He shook his head. "No, she took it. I just didn't fill it." She smiled, stepped a little closer. "Well, I think there's something holy about that." He chuckled. "That's a big word for someone who used to run boardrooms like war zones." Claire's eyes twinkled. "Maybe this is my soft rebellion." They stood there, not needing to say more. The silence between them was no longer tense. It was sacred. Later that evening, they gathered back at Ethan's house. Lila and Maya raced through the kitchen with sheets of construction paper, preparing what they proudly dubbed the Wall of Words. It was a community version of the Feel Wall, but this one had drawings, affirmations, and crayon-drawn portraits of every person who had helped Maya find her voice. There was even a box labeled "For Grown-Ups Who Don't Know What to Say Yet." Ethan peeked inside. It was empty. He laughed. "You two," he said, looking at the girls, "are going to start a revolution." "We already did," Lila said, beaming. Dinner was spaghetti and meatballs, the kind that had become a comfort ritual in their small, mismatched family. Claire sat beside Maya, her arm gently around her daughter's shoulders, and for the first time since Ethan had met her, she wasn't checking her phone or glancing toward the door. She was still, rooted. Midway through the meal, Maya leaned forward. "Can I share something?" Everyone froze. She wasn't whispering. She wasn't mouthing. She was speaking. Claire nodded, already blinking back tears. Maya pulled out a folded page from her notebook. It had a large circle, the same one she'd drawn months ago, cracked in the middle now, stitched with bright red thread. "This," Maya said, pointing, "used to be me. I thought if I broke, I'd disappear." She looked at Lila. "Then you told me people can still be whole, even if they've been hurt." She looked at Ethan. "You never tried to fix me. That made me feel like I wasn't wrong." Then she looked at her mother. "And you stayed, even when I didn't come back to you right away." Claire swallowed hard, lips trembling. Maya placed the drawing in the center of the table. Now she said quietly, "I'm not just stitched. I'm strong." There was a beat of silence that no one wanted to break. Then Ethan, voice thick, said, "You're more than strong, kiddo. You're a light." That night, as the girls settled into bed, Claire lingered behind with Ethan on the porch. The air was cool. Crickets chirped in the distance. The sky overhead was clear-wide and impossibly kind. Claire leaned into the railing, her shoulder brushing against his. "Do you ever wonder how all this happened?" she asked. "How one mistake turned into this?" Ethan looked at her, his voice warm. "I think it wasn't a mistake." She raised an eyebrow. "I think Maya didn't just get into the wrong car," he said. "I think she found the right person." Claire smiled. Then, after a long pause, "You know, she calls this her second home now." Ethan's eyes flickered. "What about her first? She says that one's still learning." They laughed softly. Then Claire turned to him, all humor fading into something softer. "I want to keep building this not just for Maya or Lila, but for us, for whatever this is becoming." Ethan didn't need to think. He reached for her hand, held it. "Then let's keep choosing it," he said. "Every day. No grand declaration, no fanfare. Just two people sitting beneath the stars deciding quietly, wholly to stay." Inside, in the room where the girls now slept, the wall of words glowed softly under a string of fairy lights, and pinned at the very top, written in Maya's small, neat hand, were 5 simple words: safe, heard, seen, home, loved. It was a Sunday morning, wrapped in sunlight. Not the harsh, overconfident light of summer, but the gentle kind that touched everything like it was waking the world with care. The trees swayed lazily. The air held the soft scent of grass warmed overnight. And from Ethan's small backyard, the sound of laughter rang out clear and full. Claire sat at the picnic table watching Maya and Lila build what appeared to be a floating fairy village in an old wooden planter box. Glue, popsicle sticks, and glitter were everywhere. Neither girl seemed concerned about the structural integrity of the bridges they'd engineered. But then again, maybe magic didn't need blueprints. Ethan emerged from the house with a pitcher of orange juice and a tray of cinnamon rolls, the kind Lila insisted were now tradition. He poured 2 glasses, nudged a muffin crumb off the bench, and sat beside Claire with a soft sigh of contentment. "You know," he said, watching the girls, "this place used to be quiet in a very different way." Claire smiled. "The kind of quiet that echoes." "Exactly." She reached for a cinnamon roll, peeled back the paper lining. And now he glanced sideways at her. "Now it's the kind of quiet that holds." The garage door creaked open with a familiar groan, and Maya ran inside like she always did, stopping at the sensory wall. She pressed her palm to the copper spiral and turned the small crank that played a soft, chime-like melody. Claire followed slower now, thoughtful. "I filed the paperwork," she said to Ethan as he tightened a hinge on the newest addition to the wall, a small color-coded set of buttons labeled Start, Stop, Breathe, Share. He looked up. For the community center, Claire nodded. "We're calling it the Pause Room. City approved it this week. A small space in the new public library modeled after this garage. You were right, we didn't need to scale it, just needed to plant it somewhere steady." Ethan wiped his hands, stood up. "And the funding." "Handled," she said with a grin. "Turns out people believe in what they can feel." He looked at her deeply. "You're different, Claire." She tilted her head. "So are you." They didn't need to say what that meant. Their changes were written in the way they stood closer now without hesitation, in the fact that she no longer checked her watch, in the way he no longer second-guessed opening the door. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting the yard in soft amber, Maya stepped onto the porch with something clutched in both hands, a hand-drawn certificate. She handed it to Ethan with both gravity and pride. "Official Helper of Safe Places, awarded to Ethan Cole." Signed, Maya. H. Claire looked over his shoulder and laughed softly. "It's real," she whispered. "She's been working on that for days." Ethan studied the drawing, then knelt to Maya's height. "You know, he said this is the first award I've ever gotten with glitter on it." Maya smiled, the kind of smile that took over her whole face. "You earned it," she said. No stutter, no whisper, just calm, confident speech. Claire's breath caught. Her hand found Ethan's. And in that moment there was nothing missing. No fear, no echo of what had been lost. Only presence. Only now. Later that night, when the dishes were done and the girls had collapsed into a nest of blankets on the living room floor, Ethan and Claire sat beneath the stars on the front porch. The porch light buzzed quietly, moths orbiting its glow. "I used to think home was a fixed address," Claire said. "A gated community, a house on a hill." Ethan sipped his tea. And now she leaned into him. "Now I think it's wherever someone waits for you with both hands open." He nodded. "It's the ride that always brings you back." She turned to face him. "Speaking of rides," he raised an eyebrow. Maya asked if she could walk herself to the car next week. No app, no drivers, just her and me. She said, "It feels right now." He smiled, eyes stinging. "She's ready." "She is," Claire said, "but I think I'll still drive past your place, just in case." Ethan chuckled. "There'll always be a light on." Before she left, Claire leaned in this time, not for a kiss but to rest her forehead gently against his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying, for not trying to fix her, for letting her rebuild herself." Ethan whispered back, "Thank you for letting me rebuild too." She kissed him, then, slow, steady, with the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly where she was meant to be. And when her car pulled away minutes later, Ethan didn't feel her absence. Because it wasn't goodbye. It was just another pause. Inside the house, the wall of words glowed softly, fairy lights dancing across it like fireflies. A new word had been added at the top. Whole. It wasn't written in Maya's hand or Lila's or Ethan's. It was Claire's. Underneath it, in smaller letters, still growing, but no longer missing. That night, Ethan sat beside Lila and Maya as they fell asleep, the house humming with a gentle peace. And as he turned out the lights, he thought of all the things he once tried to outrun, lost silence, guilt, and how in the stillness of simply staying something beautiful had returned. Not the life he had before, but the life that had waited for him, patiently, quietly, and now completely. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. Your stories and support mean more than you know. And if this story moved you in any way, don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt tales that inspire hope, healing, and the quiet magic of human connection. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep believing in second chances.